The Washington Commanders offseason is officially underway. So, what exactly are their top priorities? I've got you covered right here on Ref the District. Let's go. Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Ref the District. I'm Nathan Perry, and the Washington Commanders offseason is officially underway. Josh Harris was in front of the mic today telling us that, hey, expectations are different. So what does that mean for the offseason? Well, I've got our top 5 priorities for you right here. Now, make sure that you hit that like button for this video. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and let me know in the comment section whether or not you are going to agree with me on these top 5 priorities. Now, the Washington Commanders were one game away from the Super Bowl, and although they didn't get there, the hated Eagles did. So if you're like me and you're hoping for a Chiefs three-peat, maybe you can make it a little bit sweeter by heading over to Bet Online for the biggest betting weekend of the year, with updated odds and props for Super Sunday. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. Hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, exclusive in-game live betting. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. Whether you're a seasoned fan, first-time bettor, BetOnline offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. Visit the website today and make the game day action count a little bit more. BetOnline, the game starts here. Now, I do encourage you to bet responsibly, and maybe you don't hedge your emotional bets on there, but it is what you want to do with your wallet. Now, AP does decide what Washington Commanders are going doing with their wallet. We'll talk about whether or not we have as much money as you might have thought here in today's video. Now, let me go with number 5 here, counting down to my top offseason priority, and give you the reasons why I think these are the 5 things that Washington should be focused on here in the offseason. Number 5, re-sign key pieces. One of the reasons why Washington was so successful this past season was people like Bobby Wagner and Zach Ertz. Now, both of those guys are set to leave. Marcus Mariota is another one that you can throw in there. So who of these players are Washington going to keep? You got to remember there's other players as well. John Bates, De'Ami Brown, Noah Brown, Jeremy Chin. These are all players who played a part when it came to what Washington did. Even Noah Iggy out on defense was another name to mention there as well. So who does Washington re-sign as far as those pieces are concerned? Only the ones that I would say that are considered key pieces should be returning. And honestly, that might mean that both Wagner and Ertz are headed elsewhere, because we needed their veteran presence right here, day one, to kind of set the tone for what Dan Quinn was looking about. But now, as Josh Harris has mentioned, expectations are a little bit different. So now, do you continue to have these aging players who gave us one great season? Do you manage to think that they could duplicate that season? I do think it's going to be a little bit different. Today, Marcus Mariota was mentioned on the Pat McAfee show about having interest going elsewhere. So while he was vital to Jayden Daniels and his development as a QB, maybe that's one you let go. The point here is you have to be smart about the money that you have, because not all of these players will be returning, and some of those players really shouldn't be returning. And which ones do you bet on to repeat season? De'Ami Brown, for instance, had a heck of a playoff run. Does he warrant another contract to stay here and become potentially wide receiver 3 or 2 for the Washington Commanders? Don't think so. In fact, if I had to take a bet, out of all the names I mentioned, I'm pretty sure only Noah Igbenogany was be the one that I would expect to come back, at least with a more than 1 year contract here in Washington. That leads me to, what are they going to do with that money here in the free agency period? I'll tell you this. I think as a priority, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn should avoid the big swing. Now, I know that there's a lot of names being floated around here in free agency, a lot of wide receiver 2 names, especially when it comes to T. Higgins out there, and Washington going to grab them, maybe even trading some assets away for either a wide receiver or Myles Garrett, who came out today and said that he wanted to be traded. There are a lot of holes to be filled still on this Washington roster. Last year, they had a 60 60% turnover rate. And that number even got even higher by the end of the year after you consider the fact that they let a lot of those players go. It was a stat we mentioned here on Ref the District, actually. Of the last 4 teams in the playoff run, Washington was the lowest on homegrown talent. In fact, they ranked 23rd out of 32 teams this year on having homegrown talent. Those are the players that they drafted and built through. So Washington currently is kind of set up through free agency. Well, that means that you've got a lot of vets who didn't make it on another team who are coming to play for your team. That doesn't mean you have a lot of studs. Now, maybe you want to have one stud wide receiver or edge rusher or somebody who you can kind of hang your hat on. The problem with that, though, is if you swing big and you miss, it does cause a lot of problems. When you look at William Jackson III from a few years ago, he was a big swing for Washington. He was one of the most coveted cornerbacks coming into that free agent class. Didn't work out here, and it set Washington back. Look for Adam Peters to make smart decisions and avoid that big swing when it comes to free agency this year. So sorry, T. Higgin fans, not coming here to Washington. Moving on to my number 3, it is, in fact, going to the draft and talking about those homegrown players. One of the things that Adam Peters needs to focus on, he had an excellent first draft here for the Washington Commanders, finding several key players to put onto this roster that you can see become homegrown and develop talent. Well, he can't rest on his laurels. He's going to have to do that year after year to make this a talented roster, because while expectations have changed and we have to manage where we think success is going to be after being in the NFC Championship game, one of the things I want to make sure that we understand is the success over the long term is a higher priority than success in one year. So trading away draft picks for a player might not be the right option. And when you're talking about drafting, get rid of the draft for needs business. Adam Peters understands the proper draft mentality is getting the best player available. You don't want to reach for a player just because he fits a need in your team. You can wheel and deal those draft picks and find the right spot if you have a certain need or certain person in mind. In the end, you want the best talent available to help build this team going forward. So when it comes to the draft, you got to get the best player available. And last but not least, because it's number 2 and not number 1 on my list, you have to protect Jayden Daniels at all costs. And that is to store up on those big boys. Washington's offensive line performed okay this year. It is going to be without Sam Cosmi for some time after he recovers from his knee injury that he sustained in the playoffs, meaning he's going to miss quite a bit of the season unless he has a Herculean effort to get back for the regular season. So you need a spot at right guard, maybe just temporarily. Maybe you find a guard that's good to play at the right guard position and a center position or the left guard position if they need to swing out that way. You also need to figure out what you're doing on offensive tackle. Is Brandon Coleman going to develop into a starting tackle? Maybe, but maybe that's also on the right side. One of the key things that you see in successful teams, even when they have a great quarterback, is their offensive line gets the care that needs. Now, you don't need a Philadelphia line of studs from rounds 1 through 3 across the board. What you need is a talented unit that plays together. So that being said, you don't necessarily have to spend high draft on there, but if you're going to spend lower draft, you have to make sure that those players have a role in that offensive line. We had several injuries throughout the year to the offensive line, and we saw how important certain pieces were. Center, for instance, Biotish went out, and Michael Dieter, as much as he loves Jayden Daniels, not nearly as talented and successful on the line as his starting player in that one, Biotish. So look for Adam Peters to store and put in a lot of effort into that offensive line, but maybe not nearly as much effort as he's going to be putting into defense. Yes. Number 1 priority. I know a lot of people want that wide receiver too. They want more offensive firepower. They want all of those goodies and the fun, exciting things. But I'm telling you, If Washington is to sustain its success, they need to focus on defense. You have Jayden Daniels on offense. He is going to make a chocolate chip cookie look good out there on the field. Okay. He doesn't need to have star players across the board. He's not, to make fun of our Eagles fans, a Jalen Hurts. I do like Hurts, back off, but he doesn't need star studded wide receivers across the board. When you look at someone like Patrick Mahomes, when you look at what they have out there for Josh Allen in Buffalo, the wide receiver cores have usually one good guy and then they'll have a drop off there. They'll have a bunch of other players that are more players. Look for Washington to do that with its offense and then focus its efforts on defense. Because if you look at the teams that are in the Super Bowl right now, those are two very talented, very strong defenses. In fact, when you look at the defenses that were in the championship games, Washington was an outlier. When you look at the divisional games, Washington was an outlier. And even in the wild card, they could be seen as one of the worst defenses to be put out into the playoffs. Look for them to make those improvements. I do believe in Joe Witt Jr. as a defensive coordinator. What I want to see is him to get the pieces. I think the cornerback room could use a bit of a bolstering. I would personally sign Iggy, have him as your number 3. So you have Lattimore, you have Sanders still, and Iggy as your 1, 2, 3. Fill out the back end of that room. Safety is going to be Quan Martin and somebody else. I don't know if Jeremy Chinn's going to be coming back because that's probably going to be a hefty contract because he played very well for Washington this offseason. So the main focus needs to be on those edge rushers. I've long stated that that in football, the second most important position is the person who's going after the quarterback. Want Washington to fill that need in this offseason as they had a high pressure rate, but they didn't have a great sack rate. And that is one thing that needs to change because while pressures are good and pressures will help you win football games, sacks are the one thing that are devastating. And that's where I want Washington to improve the most. Let me know what you have for your top 5 priorities here. And let me know whether or not you think I'm wrong. As Washington Commanders head into the offseason, my top 5 priorities for them were to re-sign key pieces and avoid the big swing there in free agency, draft the best players available, and build up on those big boys. Get some offensive linemen to help out Jayden Daniels stay upright. And the most important thing is to build on that defense. Let me know in the comment section whether or not you agree with those. Of course, we stream live every Wednesday here on YouTube and Facebook at 7:30 Eastern. Make sure you join the conversation then. Hit that like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you're listening to us on your favorite audio platform after the fact, make sure that you leave us a rating and review. I'm Nathan from Ref the District. And until next time, be a fan.